Just a few months ago, the host of this program learned their good friend Doug had never listened to a podcast. Well, that's all changed now with a weekly record that commemorates these three friends and their fun, freewheeling conversations. This is Bill Kurtis, and you're listening to a piece of history and our theme song.
Doug's just a normal guy, still has his own, but he doesn't know why. Now the writing's on the wall. It's time he left the past, gonna listen to his first podcast. We know he's gonna have a ball. Interview celebrities, politics and all comedy. We'll make him listen to it all. Now here's Doug.
Wow, that was a huge get to have gotten...
Holy shit.
I mean,
the pun master.
Legend, probably.
Bill Kurtis.
Bill Kurtis, that was incredible. Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, Doug.
I'm
sure.
here. I just want to say, although I also think it's a huge get, I just thought some random stranger walked in. I have no idea.
You don't know what
you
he
don't
looks
know
like.
Bill Kurtis. For those of us who know him, what
get.
A treat.
What an incredible... I mean,
what a treat.
I am fortunate in that I do know Bill Kurtis by sight, and so I knew that... That's sort of why I gave you the hold off, motion, and let him come in,
tackle him, and
do that fantastic voice, acting that he always does.
As our listeners probably are familiar with, I should say, ladies and gentlemen, the Podiverse, welcome once again to another recording of Making Doug Listen to Podcasts, the podcast where we critically review other podcasts and then force Doug to do things and talk to you. I am joined, as always, by, at this point, at least one of my two co-hosts, absolutely starstruck.
I mean,
that's
Brandon Gilbreck, have seen 2 live tapings of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me to speak of my fandom.
Sure.
And so having Bill Kurtis here was just, I am rigid.
Fun question. Do you think he recognized you from this tape?
I know that he didn't because I said specifically to him, "Hello, Mr. Kurtis. I'm a huge fan." And he said, "Get the fuck away from me."
Yeah, he does that. He bolted out of here after doing that intro.
Very upset, it seemed.
But I got to say, what a professional while he was here.
Nothing but class.
Amazing. And of course, I'm also joined by the not as starstruck, not at all. You thought you may have been very scared that just a random individual.
Oh yeah, no, I went straight to stranger danger.
I mean, he is like 70 years old, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he could harm any of us.
Kind of physical intimidation.
It's still weird to have somebody you don't know there. Well, folks, as you can tell, the quality of the entertainment is going to be of the absolute highest level this evening.
I mean, the tip of the top.
The best of the best.
The cream of the crop.
Brandon's already name-checked the podcast that we're going to be covering this week. It's a radio show as well. And don't worry one single second. We're going to be diving balls deep into that real soon. But we're going to do what we often do, and I've realized listening to previous episodes, sometimes we call it checking in, sometimes we call it catching up. So I'm going to make it look like we intended both of those and say, hey guys, it's time for our newest segment, catching in and checking up. Brandon, I'm going to start with you. What are you listening to? What are you watching? What's going on?
Catching in.
I guess catching in?
Catching in and checking up. Very, I don't know, it strike me. So anyway, other than this brain fart that I just had, live and on the pod.
Brandon, this show is one extended hour and 26-minute brain fart.
So I have been listening to a really great show. Did I talk about Sporkful before?
No.
So Sporkful is a James Beard award-winning podcast. It's called, it's not for foodies, it's for eaters. And there is a host that I'm blanking on his name. I could pull it up. He sounds just like Steve Colbert, which is very strange, but he does a recurring show where he focuses on food and telling different food stories.
Okay.
And
what's the difference between a foodie and an eater?
I think the idea is that he is approaching it without any kind of air of it's not highfalutin. Exclusivity, exactly. Okay. It's sort of a this is for everybody. And the episode that I listened to first was called Shabbos at Wendy's. And it's about this Palm Desert Wendy's wherein all these retired Jewish people go and have the Shabbat dinner at Wendy's
Okay.
as a tradition. And so he goes and spends Shabbat dinner with them. And that was a great episode. I was like, oh, this is actually really fun.
And it sounds like it's stories around food as opposed to being about the food itself to a certain extent.
To some degree, and he does a lot of stuff like, he'll have on special guests. So he had Dan Savage. He had Ron Funches. And it's just a really good show. It's well researched, and it's about how food kind of affects our lives. So I've been enjoying that. Nicole Byer, one of the people that we've featured on this show, was a guest on maybe the second episode, I want to say.
Okay.
And then the other podcast I listened to, which was very strange, is called The End of the World.
Right.
And it's a 9-part podcast about how the world might end. And the first episode,
That sounds like fun.
it's sort of bizarre and bewildering and fun. And the first episode focused on why don't aliens talk to us, and why haven't any of our attempts to reach out to them been fruitful. And it talks about the Fermi paradox. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Fermi paradox.
Referencing physicist Enrico Fermi?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the idea that if the universe is so vast and there are conceivably other intelligent life forms that could have started long before us, why haven't we found them yet? Or why haven't they found us?
Right.
And it's sort of your few options are, one, that they've all died out, or that we're at such a far length that they'll never get to us, or that we're some sort of a zoo planet where all the aliens know about us and just want to leave us alone and let us ferment a little bit longer to become a delicious, tasty beverage.
Right.
And so that's
I'm going with Zoo Planet.
I'm going with Zoo Planet too. That makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Also, that I want to have a funk band someday called Zoo Planet.
I mean, the Vulcans found us unworthy for many
Certainly.
decades, right?
Ooh,
Certainly.
Are we going to have to... This is going to be uncomfortable.
No. Just let him.
Doug, you know
I'm
that
not wrong about that.
the documentary.
Star Trek is only partly based on fact. You're aware of that.
The meeting the aliens part.
Right.
I mean, among other things, sure, yeah.
Okay, I'm saying that's the part that's the accurate part.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In the
future.
future.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
exactly.
I get that it's in the future, but it happens.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's just that it hasn't happened yet. I sense this is going to be uncomfortable if we go any further, so we're going to let this go. But that sounds fascinating.
It's an interesting show.
It does sound fascinating.
And it's from the same people. Oh, I'm going to forget the show that he does it from. I want to say it's from like How Stuff Works. He's one of the hosts of How Stuff Works.
Right, yeah.
And so it's I've only listened to the first episode, so I need to continue listening, but it does seem like a very interesting podcast. And it's small in scope, so that's nice. It's nice when you jump in, you're like, oh, 9 episodes, I can live with that. That's not so bad. So that's what I've been listening to. Now we're
Agreed.
checking
That's
in and we're
always
catching
nice.
up.
I've been listening to, and I think you're listening to it as well. I don't think I've referenced it on the show yet, but I've gotten so much enjoyment out of the last month and a half that it's been on the, well, we'll say on the internet. They're kind of waves. They're not airwaves, just on the waves.
Sure.
Is Hey Riddle Riddle.
Yes, and it is a fun show.
It's great, and very early on, they have made a Patreon. So kind of this, hey, if you give them a few bucks every month, which is what Patreon is, it lets you patronize with a little bit of money your favorite creators of different kind, not just podcasters, but YouTubers and different folks who are working in new media. So you can support what they're doing and ideally get more of it. It usually means you get access to some special Patreon-only content. Recently, this past Friday, so just a couple days ago, they put up an episode where they each, wore personal mics and had recording equipment with them and did a Central Illinois escape room.
Oh, my.
And because they're 3 incredibly funny people.
Right.
It was hilarious. It was great.
Right. For the little background, Hey Riddle Riddle is hosted by one of the members of Hello from the Magic Tavern, which we reviewed on this podcast.
Exactly. Adil Rafai, who's Chunt. A young lady who's been on it a couple times, the character Momo, and that is Aaron Keefe. Aaron Keefe, thank you. Right. And then JPC, John Patrick Cohen, I believe is his full name, but he goes typically
just
by
call him JPC. His friends call him JPC.
They're painfully funny human beings. The first live show they did, which I think was the first Patreon offering, is maybe the funniest live show of any comedy podcast I've ever heard. It's outrageously funny. It is both quite the claim and high praise. Yes. So I've been listening to a few things, but I think that's the most notable. I realize I've been enjoying them far too much for the last 2 months not to give them a shout out.
Sure, and actually, I think that's what. So Maria and I both try to listen to the first few episodes, and she was really put off because the riddles they chose were terrible.
Right.
And at the first, they didn't really know what to do with the fact that the riddles were terrible, and now they've been able to make that a part of the show,
Absolutely,
and incorporate it. Because what they'll do is they'll tell a riddle, sort of like 50 people are found dead in a cabin in the woods. What happened? And you find out eventually that it was an airplane crash, and all the people that were dead were inside of the cabin of the airplane.
Right.
And so they go through and solve that riddle.
This is an unusually bad riddle
Yes.
that you've just given us.
And so, but now they do skits where it's like, or improvs. Where it's like, okay, Aaron, you're the pilot. Adele, you're the person who's flying on this plane, and you realize it's going down. And then they have them do kind of an improv scene, and it's hilarious. Now they've really gotten into a groove, and the show's been good.
Have.
And they have people who are sending in better riddles, which makes the show a lot better. Ghost is trying to bite me.
Yeah, of course, our listeners will not know this being a audio medium, but Brandon is articulating very enthusiastically as he's talking and literally being mirrored by my cat Ghost, who's sitting on the table and just batting at his hand. I think Ghost thinks he's playing with him.
I think Ghost doesn't like me.
It could be Brandon, none of us do.
Yay.
Doug, what about you? Now, often we joke that we don't need to go to you on checking in or catching up, Brandon.
Right.
Or catching up.
Checking in and catching up.
Catching in and checking. Anyway,
sure.
Yes.
But speaking of catching, you have caught us off guard more than once by surprising us with the fact that you have listened to something.
Right.
Is this one of those weeks? I mean, other than your assigned wait, don't tell me homework.
Well, then I guess as a little bit of a surprise, I thought I would be adventurous this week.
Okay.
And actually sought out some podcasts to listen to.
Okay,
Nice.
fantastic. Doug, hit us.
I tried a couple serials and then just one other podcast. I'm going to say that it was a success in that I listened to some stuff.
Right.
Right. When you say serial, do you mean the show?
No, I think you mean podcasts that are in a series.
Right. So
Got
it's
it.
like an audio book.
Got
Right,
it. Okay,
right.
because
Type of
there
thing.
is a
Scripted.
podcast, a famous podcast called Serial.
Yes.
Oh, never heard of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
obviously.
of the biggest, possibly of all time.
Yes, and they're doing an HBO
They are.
miniseries based on the podcast. But continue. Sorry, Doug. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
that's fine. So the first one I tried was called Intriguing Conversations with Brian Thompson.
Okay.
They are recorded phone calls and the description is what drew me in. You know, Brian Thompson makes, absurd phone calls. And I'm thinking, okay, I liked the Jerky Boys back in the day.
Sure.
You know, all that stuff. This should be funny. So the first one was him.
Don't put
I love
on
it.
his Andrew Dice Clay 1999 tour shirt.
Right, exactly. So the first one that I listened to was him calling a record store trying to get a single track cassette. So he described it on the thing what he was looking for, and he gave it a weird name. So a cassette, instead of the full album, it was like a single.
Sure.
Like they used to do with
Like
records.
they used to do,
sure,
yeah.
Like they used to do with
Yeah.
records, but it was on cassette. So he was
Right.
calling it a singlet.
Okay. And by the way, they used to have those.
Oh, did they?
Cassette,
Okay, I
oh,
thought
yeah,
he was
cassette
making
singles
singles,
were
yeah.
100%
Oh, I thought he
a
was
thing,
making
yeah.
something up. So he called a record store, and his delivery is slow,
Okay.
unemotional.
Right.
And so he called a record store and asked them for a specific one. They were kind enough. They transferred him to a second associate who looked for it, put him on hold. I don't know if this guy actually bothered to look for it, but he was gone long enough that
Sure.
at least it seemed like he went to look for it, came back and told him, no, I'm so sorry. We don't have that one. And he went, okay, thank you, and hung up. And that was it.
Wow.
And that was an episode.
How are you finding pods at this point, Doug?
Doug,
What was your
remind me
process?
again, what is this show called?
It's called Intriguing Conversations
Okay.
with Brian Thompson.
That sounds like
Well,
a lie
I
right
gotta
on his
tell you,
face.
All right,
I'm going to
well,
do a little
I
real-time
gotta tell
research.
you,
Keep going.
I went to Spreaker and they
Right.
had suggested stuff. They've suggested
Sure,
us
sure.
to their I don't know what we're called when we
Right,
sign
we-
up
we
for
were-
a podcatcher, but
Right.
So anyway, so they had suggestions. So I was just looking at different things on there, checking them out. So then I tried a couple of the scripted podcasts. Is that a better
Okay.
term for them?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
There you go.
John has talked about a few that he really
I
liked.
just want to point out, I mean, it's amazing that you went to this for a variety of reasons. One, our hilarious, shit show of a podcast
Yes.
that only our family members listen to has 23 reviews. Intriguing Conversations with Brian Thompson has 9 reviews.
Okay.
It's relatively